Good afternoon, everybody. As most of you know, I'm Leslie Wilson. I'm the director of the Career Services Office here at the law school. We are having our annual information session with people from the Massachusetts courts. The format, which I think we'll adhere to today, and it's pretty informal. I'll introduce just very generally each of our four panelists, give you a little background on them, and then I'll have each of them talk about their courts. The information sessions used to be much more exclusively focused on postgraduate judicial clerkships. As everybody on the panel can talk about, because they know better than I do, of the hiring freeze that's happened in the state, those clerkships have pretty much been put on hold to a certain extent, although they are in existence in some fashion, and they'll talk with you about that. But there are also really great internship opportunities. The other reason why we still want to talk about these post-graduation clerkships is because we are all confident that at some point there won't be a financial crisis in our state, and that there will be opportunities to have these clerkships again. And it's really important that you know about these clerkships. They are dynamite opportunities. Several of our panelists are actually graduates of these clerkship programs, and obviously like them a lot because they're still involved with the programs. And so I just think that it's really important that you get as much information about working in the courts as possible. I think you'll find during your tenure here at the school that there are lots of different opportunities to intern in the courts. You'll come across them in different fashions. As some of you might recall, I had announced earlier this year that the Boston Bar Association was initiating a pilot program to have students, upper-level students, second and third-year students, work for the district court judges in Boston, and we placed a couple of students doing that. Other times there are much more formal job announcements, and some of them are completely informal, like you know someone, whether it's a professor or a friend or a parent or someone who knows someone, and it's all good. So just be open to it. If you're interested, you can find the opportunity. Let me start by introducing everybody, and as I said, they'll speak a little bit about their courts and the opportunities there and what it's like to work there. And then we'll just open it up to some question and answer format. At any point during the discussion, someone says something, you should really feel free to raise your hand. There should be a dialogue as much as people want there to be one. Romeo Camba is a Northeastern law school grad. He started off clerking at the Superior Court, where he now works. He did that for 2 years, was an associate at a firm in Boston, was at the AG's office, and became working in the legal research services at the Superior Court, the administrative office, which runs the clerkship program and oversees how the clerks work with the judges. Next to Romeo is Denise Fitzgerald. She's a New England law graduate, and she too started out in the court that she now works in, which is the probate and family court. She did that for 2 years as a law clerk, then she became the chief law clerk, and then she moved into her current administrative role. Next to Denise is Richard Pline. Richard is a Suffolk law grad. Richard is the only person on the panel that's in the appeals court, and he has been there since 1990 as a law clerk, so I think it's safe to say Richard also loves his job working in the courts. He said to me earlier he thinks his job is a luxury. He loves doing it, so I'm sure he'll tell you a little bit more what it's like to work in an appeals court and the skills that might be a little different there. And then next to Richard is Michael O'Loughlin. Michael is also a Suffolk grad. Michael's been at his job also, I guess, since graduating law school. He's at the Boston Municipal Court, often referred to as the BMC. He's a senior administrative attorney there, and he'll give us a sense of what it's like there and what it's like to work there and how we can work there. Just to give you sort of an overview, and I think Michael's handout, the blue one, might have actually done this. The way the court system in Massachusetts is set up is there's the Supreme Judicial Court, which is our final court. our highest court. Below that is the appeals court, and then below that are the trial court departments. Within the trial court departments, there are 7 of those departments. We have members of 3 of those departments here. So the ones that aren't here, if you were at all trying to figure that out, are the district court, which is the one I mentioned earlier where we place some students in the district court. The housing court, that was the person who I mentioned earlier who had some car and weather-related troubles coming here. Kelly Jones is really interested in coming. The juvenile court and the land court, the latter 2, actually, and the district court, they've all come here before and just wasn't able to work with their current schedules. But there's information about them. But I think at this point, I'm going to have Romeo talk a little bit about what's happening at the Superior Court these days.
Hi everyone. Like I said, like Leslie says, my name is Romeo Camba, and let me just get a sense of the room. Who here is our first-year students? Okay, second-year students? Okay, third-year students. And would you guys say that you're familiar with just with what judicial interns or judicial law clerks do, or would you like some sort of explanation of that? Explanation, all right. So when you take a look at what judges do, they're hearing cases, they're getting motions, they're getting like boxes and boxes of papers. People are throwing case cites at them. And in the trial court, for example, I believe there's 37,000 new cases filed every year, and maybe a total of, 140 judges in the entire trial court. So they can't do all that work themselves. And what they have are law clerks and interns that help them with what I guess you would say the grunt work of looking through the papers, researching cases that have been cited, drafting memoranda and drafting decisions to help the judges make an informed decisions with regard to their cases. So interns and law clerks play a sort of unseen but very important role in the whole judicial process. And the nice thing about being an intern or a law clerk is it's pretty much what you went to law school for. The kind of work that you're doing is what you're learning to do in law school. And it's the kind of skills that you need moving forward in firms, et cetera, in terms of legal analysis, legal writing, and research that you obviously can put right to use when you're working for employers. So it's a kind of thing that potential employers look upon favorably. So I tend to view the year of clerkship between law school and that firm job or whatever job that people move on to as sort of the finishing school, where you can come in, you can hone your skills, you can hone your skills, and you can develop the sort of professional skills and business etiquette sort of things that people don't really talk about much, but are just as important as the kind of legal research and writing skills that we focus on. So that's internships and clerkships in a nutshell. Obviously with the clerkship, you're working full-time for the full year, you're getting the full blast experience. You have to deal with the volume of the cases that come at you. So that's the more intense experience. But internships, you're still getting a good flavor of it, even though you're there for a shorter period of time. You may not be there for full-time. And usually the cases that you will receive, therefore, are going to be a little easier. No one's going to throw 20 cases at you all at once. It's recognized that this is a learning experience as well. And with internships, you have more opportunity to not necessarily be trapped in the room doing research and writing. You have more opportunity to sit in a courtroom, observe the proceedings, learn from the lawyers who are there in front of the judges, learn from the judges themselves as to what works and what doesn't work when it comes to being an advocate. So it's just a terrific experience all around, and it's the kind of thing that I would recommend to anybody, either an internship or a clerkship, if you have the opportunity to do so. Now, the Superior Court is what we call a court of general jurisdiction. It handles both civil and criminal cases, and it doesn't specialize in any particular area. So whatever comes in the door is whatever the judges and the interns and the law clerks handle. Like Leslie says, there's been a hiring freeze for the entire trial court. So we haven't had any new law clerks since, I guess, 2008. And we're hopeful that eventually things will get better and we'll return to normalcy and then we'll have the program again. But the silver lining in that is that it opens up more opportunities for interns, quite frankly, since we still need people to do work. And we've been spending our time expanding our internship program. So in the past, judges have always been free to select an intern to work for them on their own, and they still do that. We have 80 judges total, by the way. But within the law clerk program, we've started our own internship. So it's sort of a centralized internship. You're not assigned to a particular judge. You work in a location. There's an assignment coordinator. They coordinate the assignments. There's a whole bunch of interns. You work in the same office as the law clerks. And it's actually a very good, you're right in there with everybody else. You get the same resources. You get to talk to them about your cases and really get to learn from the law clerks directly and use them as mentors. And then, of course, you have access to judges because you're still working for judges. The way we do it is when you get an assignment, once you have an assignment from a judge, you're working directly with the judge on that assignment. Now, it differs from judge to judge. Some judges are very hands-on. Some judges are, take this, get back to me when you have something I can read. So it differs, but you get a lot of experience. And like I said, when you do the internships, we encourage people to sit in the courtrooms and just learn from observing. We encourage judges to sit down with the interns and just talk about what's happening in the courtroom and give them their perspective on those kind of things. So we try to provide a very good overall experience. It's complicated from the administrative perspective because we need to find people, and then some people can only be in certain locations and some other people can only be in some locations. And then there's where the court's needs are. So we have to say, you guys will be in Boston. You guys, okay, great, you can work in Dedham, you can be in Dedham. Hey, you're available to be in New Bedford, terrific, you can be in New Bedford. And that gets a little complicated, but we're making it work. In addition to the internships, some of the schools, including UMass, have provided stipends to their law school graduates to effectively volunteer with the Superior Court. And UMass in 2008-2009 had 2 of those slots, and this year, 2009-2010, have also had 2 of those slots. And we've had great experience with the graduates of UMass Dartmouth who have been what we call law fellows with the Superior Court. And they effectively do what law clerks do. They're in the courthouse, they're working for the group of judges, and it's been really working out well.
Well, now, how many other schools are doing that? I know BC is doing that. I think Suffolk is doing that with the graduate law fellows.
Mm-hmm. BC and BU are doing the longer term projects. A lot of other schools are just doing, sort of like what they call bridge the gap type stipend program. So it's intended for a relatively short period, 2 to 3 months at a time. They provide a stipend. So a number of schools have done something like that.
Yeah.
And we're open to those people when they contact us and say, I'd like to volunteer with the court. My law school is willing to provide a short-term stipend, and can I use this opportunity to gain some experience while I'm continuing my job search? We're happy to help.
Was this summer the first summer you had the official clerkship summer program?
Last summer.
Pardon me,
Yes.
Clerkship internship summer program. Then you may have to know the
Yes.
picture down better than I do.
Yes, so we're juggling a lot of programs basically, and so last year we started a summer program for interns. Again, the difference between our summer program and the kind of thing that you could always do with judges is that it's a group thing as opposed to the individual judges thing. So we had our first summer program, and that worked out great. We've had a fall program, which is ongoing now. We're going to have a spring program. Obviously, for the fall and the spring, they're part-time gigs as opposed to in the summer when it's full-time. And we're still planning to do the summer program as well. So I will provide information to Leslie if you're interested in that.
As you can hear, I think that Romeo just really said it very clearly and concisely. The hiring freeze expands internship opportunities and graduate work opportunities. This is, when there are lemons, make lemonade. Our school has really been in the forefront of this graduate law fellows program, and that's why I was asking what other schools are doing it, because I've talked to my colleagues at other law schools about this. there are still really great opportunities. The people who are in the program this year as graduate law fellows are Michelle Keith, and I think it's Jake Skinner.
Oh, he was last year. It's
Oh, Jake and Kevin did it last year.
Aaron Miller.
Oh, Aaron, yeah.
Now Aaron Semkin.
Yes, recently married, right before her clerkship started, I believe.
Yes.
Yes, so Aaron Miller and Michelle Keith, if any of you know them from being around school. And then, as I said, no, it wasn't Gina Giorgio, it was Jake Skinner and Kevin Barretto were doing that last year. So if that's something, when you get to that level that you're interested in, those are people who have really been involved and could talk with people a lot about that. Denise, you want to talk a little bit about what's going on at your court these days?
We don't have the resources of the Superior Court. I'm a one-woman show, and I only do law clerk internship stuff part-time. I have a lot of other responsibilities in addition to running the law clerk program.
May I, before you get to, just remind me, pardon me, I want to interrupt. So the hiring freeze started in '08. If I'm correct, no new clerks could be hired, but were people who were on what was supposed to be 1 or 2 year stints, have they been able to stay extendedly at your court and at your court?
Yes.
Do you still have any of those people on board?
Yes.
How many of those people do you have?
We have 17 from an original number of 54.
We have 6 out of an original number of 24.
And the person from the housing court who is going to come, she is the only housing court clerk, from what I understand. They never had tons. They probably didn't have 54 or 24, but they might have had 4 or 5 or 6, and they now have her. So that's another thing I wanted you, when they're talking about the current clerks, there were, every year a class would come in, maybe they'd get to stay another year, then they'd leave and a new group would, there was this constant cycle. What has happened is the folks who were there in 2008 were given the opportunity in most cases, I assume, not in all, but probably in most cases, to stay and not to have to leave, but some normally leave for whatever reasons. They move, they get married, they, whatever. So there's natural attrition, but nothing replacing those people who are gone. I just wanted you guys to understand what the situation's like on the ground, which is why Romeo's trying to do everything in the world. Before this thing happened, he had a full head of hair.
And I was 6 feet tall.
All right. Sorry, Denise, I didn't mean to interrupt you from the get-go,
That's
but.
okay. So the probate and family court originally had 24 law clerks for 51 judges, and that was a pretty good ratio. With the hiring freeze, we're now down to 6 law clerks for 51 judges. So it's about 8 judges for 1 law clerk, roughly. And so we have actually reorganized the law clerk program to try to address the fact that we have law clerks located in the eastern part of the state, but nobody in the western part of the state. And so what we do now is all of the judges who have requests for assignments, they go through me, and then I assign the cases out to the law clerks. All of the law clerks are sitting by themselves. We're having monthly meetings to address the concerns and to talk about how things are going. And it's definitely a challenge right now for the remaining law clerks. And due to the inability to hire new staff, the hiring freeze is across the board. It's not just for law clerks. So when attorneys in our office leave, they're also not replaced, which is why while I still manage the law clerk program, it's only one of the many things that I do now because I took over another attorney's responsibilities in addition to the law clerk management. So what we're doing is not quite as organized as the Superior Court, although we're just as interested, we just don't have the people. No disrespect to the Superior Court. The Superior Court has, and this is important for folks to know, that there are each court, while they're all trial courts, the 7 of us, they have different staffing models, and as a result of the different staffing models, people do things in a different sort of way. So the probate and family court has administrative attorneys who are professionals who work in the administrative office, and then we have law clerks, and we have nothing in between. The Superior Court has Romeo, and then you have staff attorneys.
No, well, we have what's known as research attorneys. They're effectively permanent law clerks.
So we don't have that level in the probate and family court. You're a law clerk. and then you move on. And not that the law clerks in Superior Court don't move on as well, but they do also have this other layer of attorneys in their structure. Anyway, so what we're doing is not as formal as what the Superior Court's doing, although we are very eager to get interns in, and we're getting interns actually both at the college level and at the law school level. So if you have people who might be interested in working in the trial court, even if they're not in law school, we're certainly looking for college kids too, or college adults as well. And what we're trying to do is, again, increase the opportunities for internships. We do plan on having a formal program or formal training, but up to this point, individual judges have gotten their own interns, and then the judges have been entirely responsible for managing their interns. And whatever training the interns got was really very individualized depending on the judge that they worked with. And what we're hoping to do is not only address the judges who get their own interns, but also try to get interns that can be centrally located and can work more in a pool system. And then have one training at the beginning of each semester that you'll get the training that the law clerks would have received. We do a 3-day training for every year. When we have a new bunch of law clerks, we have a 3-day training for the law clerks. It will be shorter, of course, for the interns, but then to give them some of the real substantive information that is necessary to work in the probate and family court, because it is a specialized court. We have specialized jurisdiction. We have jurisdiction over domestic relations, that's divorce, paternity, that type of thing. And then we have jurisdiction over estates and trusts, and the Uniform Probate Code, which I don't know whether any of you have heard about this, but it's been, part of it was enacted January 1, 2009, and the rest of it is planning to go into effect. Well, it was signed in January of 2009. It was effective July 1, 2009, and then the rest of it will be effective July 1st, 2011. It completely revamps the way Massachusetts handles all of their estate administrations. And so everything that you may have learned, for those of you who are not first years, anything that you may have learned with regards to estate administration in Massachusetts is out the window as of July 1. And so,
So it just adds another layer of chaos in your court.
it's a whole nother layer of chaos in our court. It absolutely does. It actually, it's so overwhelming that we have to do our fee structure completely over because people don't have to file a lot of things that they've always had to file for hundreds of years in the probate and family court. So if you have an interest in anything that's estate related, this is a fantastic time to get into the probate and family court, because if you do an internship at the probate and family court now, you're going to be ahead of the attorneys in our office, you're going to be ahead of the law clerks, you're going to be ahead of the attorneys who are practicing. So, so if you have any sort of interest in that type of law, then it's definitely the time to think about an internship in the probate and family court. We are doing so much. We have so many committees. We've had law clerks who have been laid off, who have come back and volunteered, and so that there's no gap in the resume. And I think all of you are still current students, but for graduates, we're also open to having graduates come in and work on projects so that there is no gap on your resume, and so that people, when they are looking for jobs, can say, I have been doing things, which is very important.
Win-win. Everybody.
Nobody wants to have that on their resume. So I think the probate and family court is it's a specialized court, but any skill or experience that you get in the probate and family court is transferable to anything that you choose to do. It's not, even though you may not think that you want to do domestic relations, you don't think you could handle divorces every day, what you learn about interacting with other judges, to interacting with other students, other attorneys, what you learn about your ability to research and hone in on a specific discrete issue as opposed to writing a 15-page paper and you're sort of like hitting all sorts of things. What you learn in an internship or a clerkship can't be duplicated really anyplace else. And the judges are very interested in having interns. Many of the judges have always gotten their own, just like in the Superior Court. You know, if you have any interest in interning, please, Leslie has my information. You know, contact me, let me know. We don't have any law clerks in this area right now at all. The coverage for the courts in this area are being covered by law clerks who are further north. So I'm sure the judges down here would love to have an intern. We have courts here in Fall River, New Bedford, and Barnstable, which would love to have interns. So if you have any interest in that at all, please let me know. And like I said, we're working towards getting a formalized program going. It's just the hiring freeze, it's totally true. While it really has impacted the operation of the courts, it really has created opportunities for folks outside of the court system to get their foot in the door. And we'd love to have some interns, especially in this area, since we don't have any right now.
We had 2 graduates hired as full-time clerks after graduation before the hiring freeze. Nicole Morkovicius and Laurel Spallone, they're people who could tell you specifically what it's like to be in the probate court. If that's something that's of interest to you, we could certainly make that happen.
And Laurel Spallone was one of the best law clerks we've ever had. We had the opportunity to hire 10 additional law clerks. The next year we had an opportunity to hire 1 law clerk,
Right.
and we interviewed a number of people, and she was just such an easy pick. She was really one of the best law clerks that we've had. She's very good. So, for people who, you may not be sure that the opportunities for you are out there, they absolutely are. It's just up to you to use what's at your disposal and really make the best of it. It's entirely up to you what you do with the resources that you have.
And interestingly, Laurel, that was a last-minute opportunity. The way Denise's hiring cycle used to go is typically what the postgraduate clerkships, you apply for them almost a year in advance. The probate and family court, when Denise was running that program, pretty typically sort of right before the new clerkship year would start, if there was enough sort of extra money around in need, they would sort of find a way to hire one last clerk to handle that, and that's how Laurel was hired.
The way that the probate and family court has operated, again, we haven't hired in a couple of years, my philosophy is that we want the best people to have these jobs, and we didn't want to hire mediocre. And so what I did is we did the regular schedule, so offers by Thanksgiving, and then but I only made offers to folks that I really thought were stellar. And then in the spring, we would ask people if they wanted to stay on for another year, current law clerks if they wanted to stay on for another year. And then, again, based on quality and how they were fitting into life as a law clerk, because it does have some challenges. You can't do anything else but be a law clerk. And then if there were extra spots, I had no problem whatsoever of doing another round of hiring. Most courts don't do that. But I really felt strongly about, like I said, not hiring mediocre. I really wanted top notch, and it worked out. It always worked out.
So the moral of that little story is, if you can't get in the front door, try the back door, the side door. Just be opportunistic. Remember that things will come up, and in this instance, it was a great fit.
I think the other thing too is that since so many of you are first-year students, and the fact that you're here indicates that you are aware of things that are going on in your school. But I have over the years realized that so many people do not take advantage of the resources that they have available to them, and it's a shame when that happens. And you have, I think Romeo will speak to this. I mean, you get people who have applications, and you think, there's no focus, there's no. It's just sort of very haphazard, and you can't figure out where they're coming from, and a lot of that could be corrected by using your career services, using your professors, and really talking to them about what it is that you want to do and how do you get to that place, because that's really what career services is about right now, is how do you get to what it is that you think you want to do, and there are definite steps that you have to take in order to do certain things, and you have the resources and really need to use them.
Thanks for that plug, I appreciate it.
It's true though, it's so true.
So Richard, so you're in a very interesting situation. You're not in a trial court, you're in the appeals court, and I guess you would be considered a staff attorney or a research attorney, or what did I write your title down as? A law clerk.
Law clerk.
But it's a permanent law clerk. It's not one of these positions that cycle out, although you told me from time to time it was not necessarily intended to be this long when you started.
Well, they are one-year appointments. And just been lucky to be reappointed a few times. Have any of you attended any of the appeals court sittings here in the past?
There, from time to time, we had I think we had some not that long ago, and they're sort of ongoing, and they're often in this room.
Yeah.
There's also Board of Foreign Justice.
Well, there will be one this year. I've forgotten whether it's been scheduled already or not, but it'll be a good opportunity to see what the court looks like. But before we get into that, there are connections with the appeals court that maybe you already know. Justice Jacobs, who probably all know him, was on the appeals court till the mandatory retirement age. And the judge I work for, Cipher, taught here and lived in New Bedford for quite a while, and still has, as Justice Jacobs, good feelings about the school and the area, and I can certainly bring her greetings to all of you. And our Chief Justice, Raposa, is well known in this area, and he has almost always wanted to schedule a sitting in the court, either at the law school or in New Bedford or Fall River, and that's happened quite a few times in the past. When the next sitting occurs, I think you ought to look in for a while. I don't want to get into too much about the history of the appeals court. It's relatively new. It's only organized in 1972. Before that, the Supreme Judicial Court used to get all these appeals, and how they ever did it, I don't know. It eventually just got to be too much. And also, if you read the history of the SJC, they used to travel around. I don't know how they did that in the days of horse buggies and so on, and hearing the cases they heard in various locations. Well, that's really no more. The SJC doesn't move. The appeals court moves. And that's partly because they sit in panels of 3. And we now have 25 justices, and we've had an unusually stable budget environment. So we've not been affected by any freezes or layoffs and so on.
It's a very nice
Oh,
way
Richard,
of
you're
saying
gonna
it.
get, someone's gonna trip you on the way out.
Very diplomatic.
Well,
The appeals court and SJC are funded different than the trial court system.
yeah. Well, it reminds me, my federal courts law prof, he's the first person who ever made me aware of what the federal court system is like. You know, there's only the Supreme Court in the Constitution, and everything else is the creation of Congress. All these district appeals courts, the whole thing, are all controlled by Congress. And of course, the way my prof said that was, look out, you know. But I don't think Congress would ever do what has happened in our state. You know, the federal court system is just too big to put any brakes on. Anyway, we've had a very good, largely through the hard work of our Chief Justices, and especially now Chief Justice Raposa has a terrific relationship with the legislature. And so we've had budget cuts, but they've been manageable, and through a combination of things like not filling some positions and retirements and so on, we've really lucked out. So to get to the nitty-gritty of law clerks, I think I should point out that you, I think, heard a lot about, but it was a very good presentation of what law clerks do. Pretty much the only difference in our court is that a law clerk is assigned to a single justice, and so a very close relationship can develop. And I can attest to that. I started working for Justice Jacobs, and it was like dying and going to heaven. It was and having a tutor, you know. And the same is true with Justice Seifert. She just is absolutely wonderful. But our court's looking for 30 law clerks next year. And probably the year after that, the figure will be around that. Each justice gets one clerk and the chief gets two. There are also intern opportunities. I think we may have about 15 or so now. And then on more rare occasions, there's a group of staff attorneys who do various things from screening cases initially to editing decisions. And they're all pretty high-powered. Occasionally, one of those jobs, some of them are part-time jobs, occasionally one job will open up. So I think that adds another opportunity for anybody who later on would want to look and apply for an opening if it's available. It's great work, I think.
Richard, one of the things that you had mentioned earlier, we were talking about the differences between, we were informally before the session started talking about the differences between being in trial court and working in an appeals court. And maybe you could explain that to the students who may not actually understand the big distinction.
Yeah.
In terms of just your day-to-day atmosphere kind of stuff.
Pretty much the law clerk does whatever the justice asks the
Well, that
law
doesn't
clerk.
change in any court, that's the same.
Yeah. But it would be limited to cases that are submitted on briefs. There is oral argument. Law clerks usually go to oral arguments. I don't anymore because I work here. And, I don't really need to hear the oral arguments. Judges do. And but it's interesting. And certainly if you're a new law clerk, you ought to go to oral arguments. But
Wait, and you can also, I don't know if you can for the appeals court, but for the SJC, you can download them. You can live watch them, all that.
yeah, good. That's a very good point. You can learn a lot from downloading those recordings of the oral arguments. Or you could go up to Boston. But essentially, the law clerks work from the written record and do whatever research the judge asks the clerk to do. And it's really wonderful because you don't have any distractions. You know, it's not that attending trials is a distraction, but you know, it does take time. And law clerks work from this cold record. I find that really very satisfying. It's, you know, I always found my daughter was very mystified when she was little, when I told her that I was paid to read all day. She didn't know how that was possible.
You know, I tell the law clerks too, like, we hired you for your brains. You're like, that's really what you're hired for as a law clerk. You're hired to get along with people who think. I mean, that's your job. And
the difference though in the trial courts though is you might be asked to make a quick determination about evidence, you might be handling
you're like this
motions
in a
that
trial
are coming
court.
in, you know, things can sort of change on a dime,
Yeah.
and often do, whereas in Richard's court, right, you know, it's a lot of just contemplation about, you know, there was a decision, it was appealed, people have written their briefs about why they think the decision was either correct or incorrect, and then, you know, it all has to be reviewed and a new decision has to be made, and there might be oral arguments by the two sides, but there's not this constant emergency motions and evidence that's getting suppressed and emergency witnesses and things like that. So the pace is different, and as Richard said, and as you might not find surprising, he finds the pace at the appeals court suits his temperament.
I think another significant difference between being a clerk in an appellate court and in a trial court is that oftentimes in the trial court, there are no memos. Like, there's no written record per se. You may have a motion, but it's not fully briefed like it would be at an appellate level. And that's very different because then the law clerks are really starting from scratch. They have a premise or an issue, but they don't necessarily have a record to go off of.
You know, before I forget, I think everything that you could want to know about the appeals court is on its webpage. I don't know if any of you have ever looked at it. That's well worth doing. It's very complete, very informative, and there's even a little picture tour of the John Adams Courthouse. If you haven't seen the John Adams Courthouse, you must go. It really is just absolutely magnificent renovation of the old, what was the old Superior Court from long ago. And I don't think that there's been another historic preservation project like that in the country. It's just extraordinary. It would be nice to work there, but
I work there.
Yeah.
I have an office there. It is lovely.
Yeah. Now, I don't know much about clerks in the SJC, but my suggestion is if you're interested in clerking at the appellate level, you probably would also want to apply to the SJC. I'm sure it's very competitive. The appeals court is very competitive, and probably any clerkship is very competitive, but there's no reason why you shouldn't also apply to the SJC. Now, I think that's as much as I should say at this point, and ask you for questions later.
Thank you. All right, Michael, you're on.
It's not easy to go last. We've heard 3 such wonderful presentations. I think I even know more about being a law clerk than when I was a law clerk. I'd like to thank Leslie for inviting me here, and thank you all for coming today. My name is Michael O'Loughlin. I'm an administrative attorney at the Boston Municipal Court. In 2003, the legislature expanded the BMC to 8 divisions in Suffolk County. We have 8 courts in the city. And I've been there since 1994. It's interesting when you see your life reduced to a 4-line paragraph. I wish it was all that easy. When Leslie said about the back door route, that just kind of, you could put back door next to my name, because that's how it worked for me. Coming out of school in 1994, the economy was pretty similar to what it is today. Maybe not quite as bad. But I had an interview at a firm with someone who said it's never been easy to get a law job in Boston. So I think that's kind of a good perspective to keep, that, you know, some years are better than others, but, you know, Boston's a competitive market. It's an attractive place to live. So it's never going to be easy to get your first job. So if you keep that in mind, nobody's ever really had it easy to get their first job. So you do what you can. One person that I like a lot, at least his books are fantastic if you want any career advice, is Donald Trump's book. Whether or not you like The Apprentice, whether or not you like him, whether you don't like his son or his daughter, his books, I think he doesn't even write them. But they do have really good career advice on how to interview, how to dress, how to act in an interview. And from the judges that I work with, they all adhere to that. I mean, there's a certain kind of person that becomes a judge, someone who generally is, you know, well respected, a high achiever, has high standards of others, and they, you know, when you interview with a judge, they expect you to show up well dressed, you know, polite, courteous, and these things like you take for granted. But I've come to realize that a lot of students, unfortunately, aren't told these things by anybody. And it's not really an interviewer's place to say, well, you know, you really blew it, but next time you might want to, you know, ditch the open collar shirt, or, you know, get rid of the sneakers, or stop chewing gum, or, you know, stop staring out the window when I'm talking to you. So just a friendly advice, and your career services people can be excellent sources of that type of information.
I have too. I've told, sometimes people will call after the fact and they'll say, well, you know, they'll ask. I don't do it unsolicited, but
I don't believe that.
I don't. No, I really don't. No, I would never do that. I would, no. Although I have stopped people in the hallway. Because I would go out and
my customers.
I would go out and get them and bring them back, and I give them like a speech on like who was going to be in there, what to expect, you know, to relax and all of that. And if they had gum in their mouth, I would tell them to swallow it. I would, because someone's got to do that.
I have told them. Unsolicited.
Unsolicited, you have. In the interview.
I let them finish, and then I say, okay, the interview is finished. I'm gonna switch hats now and just give you some input. And then I give you some input.
Good for you.
Like,
A lot of what you just said there.
Yeah.
They have to blow it pretty badly.
And judges...
I actually think that's great, because I think that what happens, and we're sorry we're interrupting you, Michael,
Yeah.
but you'll learn how this group operates for the first time.
We've only done this panel, the 3 of us, I don't know, 5 times at least.
I think it's really important, because I talk to students about this, I talk to alumni about this, I talk to friends about this, about interviewing and professionalism, and Romeo talked about professionalism at the very beginning, about just etiquette and how internships help you develop all of that. But you do sometimes want to say to someone, like, you're not going to really wear that, are you? To an interview, you're not going to really do that, are you? You have to sort of think about it in a way that's productive and helpful. And I think the way Michael actually put it was really interesting. He's describing how the personality of your interviewer, who in this case would be a judge, and what their standards are, and what their life outlook and view of the world is, and what they expect of themselves. And therefore, if that's the person you're hoping to work for, you have to kind of put your mindset around it that way. And it's a great way to explain to people, you know, and then to say, and therefore you need to also be punctual and polite and courteous and well-dressed and, you know, because that's who your interviewer is going to be. And I think it's a nicer delivery than maybe I might have suggested.
Oh.
I'll try to remember that one.
So that being said, you know the target that you have to try to convince to get an internship. Working in the court system is fantastic. Being an intern or a law clerk is an awesome experience. It's also a responsibility. One of the things that the judges in our court particularly put a high value on is being confidential and having respect for privacy, you know, working on sensitive documents. Even with Richard's job, you might think what he's doing is abstract. It's really not. Every case that comes into the courthouse involves people. It involves time, lawyers' times. People sit up at night worrying about these cases. You know, what does this mean for a family, or what does this mean for someone's job, someone's career, whether it's a criminal matter, someone's going to jail or not going to jail. It's pretty serious when you actually, you know, think beyond the file that's in front of you. And it's easy sometimes to just, you know, when you have a stack of case files in front of you, to think, oh, here's another one, another summary judgment motion, another motion to suppress. But if you do a sloppy job with what you're assigned to do, research, writing, advising a judge, and the judge relies on your sloppy job, which they don't usually do, you know, that affects, and I don't even use the word sloppy maybe too strongly, but if you don't do a really good, thorough job, you know, maybe there's the case you could have found that would have made all the difference in the world to those people and their lives and their future. And there have been cases that I've worked on where, you know, doing that extra half hour of research turned out the perfect case that answered the question and saved someone from having to go to the appeals court and bothering Richard's judge and Richard and their court administrator and the expense of more litigation. So being involved in the court system, it brings what you're studying here to life. And I went to Suffolk Law School. I loved it there. It was very hard. As I'm sure I can tell, you guys all look like you're a little tired and worn out, so I feel bad for you. But it gets better. Have a brownie. You know, it gets better. When I started law school, on the first day of law school, there was a successful graduate who spoke to us, who got a big job in Washington. And I don't remember his name, but I always remember what he said. He said that law school was like a shipyard where you would construct the ship that would transport you through the rest of your legal career. And, you know, we're up on Beacon Hill at the time. We were just talking about how Suffolk moved places. And, you know, you could kind of sort of imagine seeing into Boston Harbor and Charlestown, and there's old Ironsides, and, you know, it's stood up over, you know, 250 years or whatever it is, and, you know, bouncing off cannons, you know, like that's the kind of ship that I want to make while I'm in law school. And then after your teachers start, you know, pounding on you in first year, and you spend more time figuring out what you're supposed to be learning than what you're learning. And why didn't he just say that instead of making you read all these cases? You know, but sometimes, you know, other ships came to mind, like, you know, the Titanic or the sinking rowboat that we used to, you know, sail on the Charles River. And, you know, so law school is tough, and you should give yourselves a lot of credit. I think law school can be kind of solitary at times, and that even though you're all friends, you know, there's still a little competitive element, and nobody's going to say, oh, you did a great job reading those cases last night. And your family members probably don't see much of you anymore and don't know what you do, and, you know, complain about the bills and your lack of involvement in your family. So it's a real sacrifice.
And then you get to be a law clerk, and your hours are 8:30 to 4:30, and you're like, sweet!
You get a life back when you're a law clerk, and you actually get some respect with people. When you're working, you get respect from everyone. It's been an adventure for me working in the court system. I recently worked on a project called Fugitive Safe Surrender. I don't know if anybody heard about that, if anybody turned themselves in. You didn't actually have to be a fugitive to turn yourself in. We tried to count a few there were people that turned themselves in who didn't have any record.
Because they thought they did?
They did, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is, there were
That's
people,
fascinating.
there were people with like minor motor vehicle offenses who had fought for like 30 years. Someone from 1976 turned themselves in with a motor vehicle offense and had that weight on their shoulders for
all that
all that time. Every time the police, pulled them over or pulled someone over, thinking that they were going to be arrested and hauled off. It was an incredible program, which involved my office for over 18 months. And to set up a temporary courthouse and a church had never been done before. And one of the things I'd like to share with you is that law clerks positions and internships train you to be, a judge someday, or a litigator, or a lawyer, but there's a whole vast array of jobs in the legal system and in the court system. We have accounting people, we have security people. It's a big organization. Right now, there's about 6,100 employees in the trial court. 4 years ago, there were almost 7,900, so you can see the drop in personnel. There's a department that builds and designs court buildings, court capital projects, policy and planning departments, and each of these departments has lawyers that work in them. And the only way you find out about jobs like this is to actually get in the system and meet people and learn about it. They're not really, sometimes they're advertised, but most jobs are, obtained by, hearing about it, applying for it, and knowing about it.
Is it true that there is preference for internal candidates, meaning within the state system, for most of these positions?
I don't know. I think it depends on the hiring authority. Certainly if someone's, worked in an office, or people know of someone's reputation, that would give them a leg up, but I don't.
I know certain, actually,
Yeah.
part of the union contracts in certain of the, every state agency and department may have different unions and whatnot, which I'm learning about myself right now. But sometimes, in fact, there is a preference for internal candidates. So if you are within the system, if you're a state employee, then you might, in fact, get first dibs on another state job. So it helps to just get in the system and then kind of find your spot within it where you really think you fit best.
And the law clerks are not in the union.
Hmm.
They often get the benefit of union things that happen, like step increases or raises and stuff like that. But they're not in the union, and most attorneys would fall on the management scale, so they wouldn't be union either. Just, there's like 3 or 4 tiers of
Yeah.
management.
Yeah. I guess it's different within the state agencies. Within the state agencies,
State agencies
some
themselves are much more.
attorneys are,
Yeah.
in fact, union. Their level of being management, meaning that you're excluded from the union, there's so many layers that you have to be like super upper level management to be excluded from the union. So there's a lot of sort of what they would, I guess, call middle management, which would cover a lot of the jobs. That was sort of referring to. Sorry, to interrupt you.
Oh, no.
You had mentioned about your entry into
Oh, yes.
the,
The back door.
into the BMC, and if you don't mind sharing that, I'd be interested to have the students hear about it.
Yeah, actually, I graduated from school in 1994 and took the bar and passed, first time, hooray. And then was jobless for 8 months and, working in a department store. And that's kind of tough when you're used to, working hard, reaching your goals and moving forward, to find yourself, okay, now what do I do? And you have bills to pay, and parents desperately want to see you gainfully employed, and you have plans for your life that are all of a sudden, dependent on earning a paycheck. I heard of an opportunity at the Boston Municipal Court for an entry-level position. Back then, they had a different job category, but it was basically called Procedures Clerk 1, or PC1, which is the lowest of low positions. And I actually had like an entry-level job before I started law school. When I started the trial court, I was making $5,000 less, and I was thinking, like, how is this, going to work? But the Chief Justice that hired me at the time said, there's no limits on what you can accomplish here, and he gave me full access to. Back then, it was one court department, all 11 judges, and said if there was anything I wanted to do while I was there, to feel free to go to the social law library, attend any classes that I wanted to take. So it was really like almost like a graduate school for me, having these 11 judges, I'm sorry, to guide me and to teach me. And we had 2 administrative attorneys back then, and also 2 law clerks. So when I started there, I had the benefit of having all these experienced judges and experienced attorneys telling me how to act and what to do. Unfortunately today, we have 30 judges, we have no law clerks, we have 2 administrative attorneys and a legal counsel, and everyone's pretty much overloaded and overwhelmed.
What was the status of law clerks before the hiring freeze? Like when you sort of would your normal level, was it 10, 15, 5, 4?
3. We never really had a normal hiring system when we were expanded. There was a lot of criticism on our court at the time that we were overstaffed, so the law clerk division never really expanded to meet the needs of 30 judges, and it was always a sensitive political and fiscal concern that we not have too many law clerks. And I don't know if we'll ever have 3 law clerks again, even though there's definitely a need for it. And the judges in our court feel that they're on their own for much of their legal research needs.
Is the, pardon my ignorance on this, is the BMC similar in its jurisdiction than the district courts? Is it, but just for Boston?
Yes.
So it's a court of general jurisdiction, but with $1
I think
max?
it's 25,000. We do civil and criminal.
Just within the confines of the city of
Yes.
Boston? And then otherwise, those would be called district courts, like in other areas of
Correct.
the state?
Something here reminded me, one thing I think, maybe it's too general a statement, but a lot of judges are able to decide some matters without making findings or even giving reasons. And I don't think that that's abused, but a busy judge with a case that doesn't seem to have much merit might simply write on the memorandum or the motion requesting some action, deny. And then that kicks it up to the appellate court, which can decide on any ground that they reasonably can find that supports or in some cases reverses that decision. I think that it is often a very good way out for a very busy judge. And
Do you find that has happened more often? Is that something that anecdotally you say might be something you've seen more in the last couple of years?
Not really often, but sometimes. And then, but of course, a lot of judges' work, findings are required. Say, motion to suppress. If the judge doesn't make findings, they're going to get it back, make those findings. But
I think it's helpful to actually explain what findings are, because I don't know that everyone knows what they are, and I don't know that a lot of people who start law club programs know what they are. So if you have a jury, then the jury determines what the facts are, and they make findings essentially with their verdict. If you have a civil case or a criminal case that's on a motion, is that right? Motion?
Well, if you're talking summary judgment, there's no findings.
If there's no findings, it's just a decision.
You're just relying on the standards.
On the standards.
Yeah.
So in the probate and family court and in other courts, you have to specifically, the judge has to specifically set forth what the judge determines the facts to be, because we have no juries. Okay, so if you're either in a bench trial or a jury waive trial, or you're in the probate family court, then the judge actually has to write down what they find to be the truth.
And that's
The truth,
important
the facts.
because when the case gets
Right.
appealed, it can only rely on those facts that have been set out at the trial court.
Right, so you have evidence, you have testimony, and then the judge determines from that evidence or that testimony what the facts are, as opposed to a jury who decides what the facts are based on their vote.
And something that law clerks typically would do would be help the judge with
Right, the
findings.
findings.
That's the
Right.
Not in the Superior Court.
Okay. So Richard, you were saying, so that, the judge can make these determinations without any findings, and then
Yeah,
it gets bounced up to your court.
right. If the judge is not required to make
Right.
findings, probate and family work, they're pretty
We have to
much
do
done.
findings on just about everything.
Well,
Even temporary motion, temporary leave. So if you file a motion for temporary orders and you want to have custody changed on a temporary order, then you have to do findings on a temporary order, which most courts don't have to do that sort of stuff, but when you're dealing with families and kids, you
Yeah,
do.
and those are really, I think, difficult for judges, and most of them do a very good job. You'll find cases that have 100 or 150 findings. That's a lot of detail in some of those family cases. And conclusions of law, run 30 or 40 conclusions of law. It's tough. And of course, it's also very hard to review those on appeal because you got to really dig through the record. But anyway, I don't want to go too much farther than that. I think the judicial system that we have is pretty amazing. I don't know much about other countries, but I think our system has come a long way. People are going to get a fair shake, even if it takes a couple of levels of appeal.
I think that, I know when I was in law school, I actually went to New England at night and had a job. And I didn't go right from college to law school. I had another life before that. And I didn't know that much about the court system except for the fact that I had jury duty. And I found that like our mass practice class was helpful, but didn't really give you the full picture necessarily. The place that I think that you could go to learn the most about the court system in Massachusetts is mass practice. Like, go to mass practice, get out one of the volumes. Almost all of the volumes have some section on the trial court system, and read one to really get a flavor of what the court system in Massachusetts is, how it operates, the structure, the reporting structure. There are so many things that you will never understand until you either submerge yourself into the court system or do some reading about it, because it can be a little convoluted and how things work. Like the trial court, our boss, the trial courts, we report to the CJAM. That's what we call him, the Chief Justice for Administration Management, who is appointed by the SJC, even though he doesn't necessarily report to the SJC. It's very complicated on how it's set up, and I would encourage you to.
Departments also, as you were saying earlier, are also set up differently, and each has different jurisdictions.
Right,
and,
so there are
there's
7
just
trial
training
courts, and each trial court is set up differently. So it's as simple as some are set up by county, and some are set up in divisions. So the probate and family court has 14 divisions, and that's what they're called. They happen to correspond with our counties, but it's not a county system, it's a division system, which is different.
And then the BMC is just Boston.
Just Boston.
So what else would you say about students who might be interested in interning at BMC, Michael?
Just send us your resume. The judges pretty much select their own interns. If you send it to our court administrator or to myself, we'll try to, float your resume around, see if, there's any interest. We love to have interns, but it's a commitment that we take seriously. We don't want to waste your time having you do something that you're not happy with, and it requires some supervision on the court's part to make sure that you're actually learning something. And the judges, I think, more than anyone, understand that. So, some judges, don't want to be tied down with an intern. Others really kind of embrace it. One judge one summer had 6 students working for him, and they occupied our library, and we called it, after this judge's name, law firm. And the students would dress so well, and every day the rest of us were like, okay, I guess we're going to start dressing a little better. These guys are going to have our jobs. And but that group of students was so professional, so helpful, and I think when you're someone's intern, you kind of have to remember who brought you in. One time, I always get the phone calls for interns. I don't know why, but someone put through a call, and it was from a woman in San Francisco who had graduated law school out there, was from Boston and coming back. She took the California bar, but due to a technicality, wasn't able to take the Mass bar till February. So she had like a limbo period where she couldn't really work here as a lawyer, and she wanted to volunteer. And it turned out we went to the same high school. So of course, it's connections like that make you say, well, all right, versus, well, I'll send your resume on to my manager and see what happens. And she did a wonderful job, and that's how people get things, internships. You send your resume in, you might follow up on it, but you have to remember who brought you in. I just couldn't say yes. I had to ask our Chief Justice if she could, work in our office, and he said, she's more than welcome to work here, but she's your responsibility, and if she screws up, it's your fault. And when this person came, she did a great job, but she a lot of people, think that an internship is all about working with the judges, and we try to give our interns as much exposure to the judges as possible. But she wasn't assigned to a judge, she was assigned to me. And after a very short period of time, she started to just kind of like blow me off. And she actually was, trying to, make relationships, professional relationships with the judges. And it got to be kind of an embarrassing situation for me because someone had kind of gone beyond the limits of, their assignment. So when someone does that, it makes you kind of more careful next time. I'm sure, like I said, 99.9% of our interns are fantastic, but everybody has had a crazy intern in their office. And when you have one, it makes people think like, oh, we don't ever want to do that again. So, when you're in an office, if someone brought you in, make sure that you're, I don't like the word loyal, because I think that that's just limiting, but you have to know who you report to, whether it's an attorney or a judge. And also the staff that works in a court, the clerk's office, probation. Some interns come in with a mindset like the judge is the only one that matters.
Oh,
and
they do that in law firms, they do that everywhere.
And you won't get anywhere unless the staff likes you. If you're trying to look something up, you can wait in the clerk's office for an hour before someone will help you. If they don't like you, well, they'll give you bare minimum help if they really don't like you.
And that goes back to what I said earlier, like literally you're hired for 2 things, to get along with people and to think. Because we've all done it. We've interviewed people who are like, their grades are off the charts. You look at them on paper and you think, wow, they're fantastic. This is going to be a great fit. And then they come in for an interview and they're arrogant or like not together, or you think that does not match up. Whose documents are those, because they cannot be this person's. And so it's not just about getting good grades and being able to research and knowing the court jurisdiction and knowing what you're dealing with. You also have to be able to get along with people and to understand what your role is and what your role isn't.
And also, and this goes for really any kind of work situation, and Romeo and I were actually talking about this a little bit beforehand. It's a fit. It's like any job, sometimes the fit's good, sometimes it's not. I had I'll share a story with you about someone, she was a third year at the time. She wanted to do a little work while she was in school before studying for the bar. She wanted to kind of sock away a little bit of money, and she wanted to be a clerk at a law firm that year. And long story short, she interviewed with a guy who was local, and she knew that having his name on her resume would be helpful, and the work she'd do there, she'd get good experience. But quite frankly, she thought he was a jerk. And quite frankly, I thought she was not incorrect about her judgment about him. But I said to her, I said, listen, you know, if you know he's a jerk and you're willing to work with him in this short period of time, you know, so be it. If it's a situation that you find that you can't manage, then don't get into it to begin with and then have to quit on it. You know, it's all a fit, and you know, for some people, there'll be people who get an internship while they're in law school, or, you know, a paid position at a firm in law school, and they're still working for those attorneys, and now they are their partners several years out of law school. I mean, sometimes it's just amazing, and sometimes it's not. It doesn't mean that the experience isn't a good one to have, even if you and your supervisor are not, you know, two peas in a pod. It's just something to keep in mind, that part of finding any job is fit. And each court is a different fit, and working in a court and working for the government is different than working in a private practice, and a big firm is different from a small firm, and so on and so forth. So
And everybody needs to learn how to work for a jerk at one point in their life. No, seriously. No, I think that people are idealists when it comes to working sometimes, especially law clerks who start off, they're idealists. And they're just jerks in the world. And you have to learn how to deal with it, and not be whiny, and not complain, and it stinks. But if you can't do it at the lower level, then it's going to be even harder as time goes on. It's a good lesson to learn that sometimes people are just jerks, and you have to learn to do it.
Can I touch back on a point made by Michael? I started today talking about what the benefits are for you as interns, and they are terrific. But it is a two-way street, and people don't bring in interns out of the goodness of their hearts. They're expecting that you'll be able to come in and provide benefit, and it's a cost-benefit analysis, and it takes more time to manage you and to correct your work and all that kind of stuff.
Find out where you're supposed to be,
Right,
and are they
right,
supposed to
right.
be here on Tuesday? Oh, they're not coming on Tuesday, they're gonna come on Thursday instead.
So I think sometimes we get people who aren't clear on that concept. And they're really, you know, it's more of a what's in it for me, and if what you're asking from me is inconvenient to me, then I want to resist you on it. And so if you're going to do an internship, whether with a court or anywhere else, you can't have that attitude. You have to come in there eager and with the idea that you're going to do what you're asked to do, and that you're in there to learn. And if you're in there because you think it's going to look good on your resume, that's not what we want. And I think it's a good thing to put out there, is that you really need to come in there. And to add to that, it's not just about you. You represent your schools, right? And you represent interns in general, because we do have experiences where we'll have someone will have a bad experience with someone else, and their position will just be, you know what, I don't want interns, I don't want to deal with interns. And that makes things tougher for me, for example, when I believe in the intern program, and I'm trying to find people to accept interns and to give their work to interns. So it's a self-propagating, it's a self-fulfilling kind of process. If the interns before you have done good work, you'll have better experiences. And if you do good work, you'll be helping the people behind you. Don't be the jerk who burns the bridges
Right.
for everybody else.
Because it only takes one.
Yeah,
Sometimes it really does only
takes
take one.
And your ship will be sunk before you even leave law school.
Right.
It-
Plus people will, yes, it's a
Yeah.
small community, people
is.
remember.
They really do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
I know the time is coming up for us to end, so I'm going to make 2 points that I wanted to mention to everybody, and then maybe everybody on the panel can think about if there's any sort of final words of wisdom that they want to share that they haven't yet. 2 things I want to mention. First of all, for first-year students only, there is a new graduation requirement that you do 30 hours of pro bono work before you graduate law school. As you all know, 30 hours is not a lot of time. And it could be done, as we were saying, in a weekend, in a spring break. It can be done 2 hours a week, 15 weeks, which is a semester. The real goal of the program is to introduce and to really develop your commitment to public interest law, whether as a career or as part of your other legal career. But I mention it because working in the courts would be something that would qualify for your 30 hours. Now, I also want to caution you, some of you may not have heard about this requirement because the goal really is that you not start working towards it until you've finished your first year coursework. I don't have to tell you guys that first year is enough in and of itself, and that trying to strike the right balance between school and anything else is a struggle. But it's something to keep in the back of your mind for what you might want to do this summer and what your plans are for going forward next year, and that might be one of the things you do to strike your balance next year to find something. So think about that. For upperclassmen, second, third, and fourth years, the prior voluntary 20 hours of pro bono work is still in effect. If you do 20 hours in a year, the year starting from May 1st and ending on April 30th to coincide with graduation. If you do 20 hours and report that to me on the form and have the supervisor sign off on it, that's what you need to do. All pro bono work has to be legal in nature. It has to be supervised by a licensed attorney. It has to be uncompensated and have no academic credit attached to it to qualify either for the graduation requirement or for the voluntary acknowledgement. More on that later, but I mention it because, again, this is a great resource. If you're looking for interns, it might match up some of your interests. The other thing I want to mention also for upperclassmen is that, we're talking a lot about courts and the judicial system and so on and so forth. Every year the school does a trip for upperclassmen to visit the U.S. Supreme Court and hear oral arguments. This trip is outstanding. Every year I take alumni to get sworn into the U.S. Supreme Court. Sometimes we do this trip with students. Sometimes we do it without students. We used to just, we've recently broken it back up into 2 separate trips. It was nice when we did a one trip because the students could meet the alum can talk to current students, slightly different atmosphere, but in any event, I believe the trip is going next week for the upper level students. Keep this in your mind. Richard was talking about going to see what the courthouse is like. Different people are talking about what it's like to be in there. We almost always meet with at least one of the justices. If you're interested in the courts and how this all functions in our country, this is something to think about finding a way to do. Having said that, I don't know if anybody on the panel has some sort of final.
Oh, I can always keep talking.
Is it just that Denise talks more than
Why is it always that it comes down to me? I don't talk the most.
No, you're very outgoing, and I appreciate having someone like
There
that.
are times when there's time that needs to be filled.
Something I like to say at these law clerk panels as a piece of advice is what I have found about law students who successfully, say, become law clerks, and law clerks that have successfully moved on to, I guess, bigger and better things, compared to, the majority group, what makes people stand out is that they seem to have figured out what everybody else is doing, done it, and then figured out what more they need to do beyond everything else. So I know in law school it's very tempting to take the conventional route, see what everyone else is doing, and follow the crowd, right? But all that establishes, when I'm looking at a pile of resumes, is that you're the person in the crowd, right? You need to figure out a way to do what everybody else is doing and then do a little bit more. So just by way of example, most of your classmates are not here. You are, right? That's something that's different that, presumably there's going to be lots of people who would be interested in interning or clerking for the courts, but they didn't find a way here, but you guys did. Most of any group of people, any group of law students are going to spend time becoming adept at online research. Only a small percentage are actually going to take time to learn to become very good at book research, right? So So when I see someone who's good at book research, I'm not impressed just because they're good at book research. I'm impressed because they are doing more than what everybody else, and I extrapolate greater things about that person. So that's my piece of advice to you, is to think about that. Don't just be the person in the crowd.
As I was sitting here thinking about people who have interned and then stayed with the court, it comes back to this one woman who went to UVM and really did UVM, no, not UVM, the Vermont Law School. I don't know if it's not UVM.
No, it's law school.
And they have a very environmental focus, and her interest is in probate. So she like hounded me to get her an internship. And it took me a while to get a judge to agree to have her as an intern. And she did. She interned for the summer. She sent me this beautiful bouquet of flowers as a thank you, which I couldn't even imagine, and did an internship in Essex, which has a large probate caseload, and had a great summer. Went back to school, applied for a law clerk, got the law clerk position, and then got this job as a probate attorney. And it just occurred to me as I was sitting here, she is the law clerk, former law clerk, who, when she got laid off, came back and volunteered for the court and has done so much to implement the UPC that the court could barely have done this without her.
Uniform Probate Code.
The Uniform Probate Code, and her I don't know, her excitement for the probate court started when she was a student, and it's going to help her. She's now in an LLM program at BU. So it's like you've got to own yourselves. You've got to figure out who you are, what you like to do, and then own it, and do what you have to do to get other people to buy it. And
Network, I think, is what she's saying.
but it's not.
Reach out.
But you have to really get to who you are before
Yes.
you can even do that. And so, like Romeo says, don't be part of the crowd. And if it means that you have to really figure out what it is that you're interested in and how you're gonna to get that, then you have to do that before you can do anything else.
Richard, Michael, any other words of wisdom?
Well, can I tell a funny story?
Absolutely.
Do any of you know Chief Justice Marshall of SJC? I mean, you know her.
Personally doing
She
that?
was at a conference.
You know her.
I say hello to her when I see her on the steps.
You know her reputation. I mean,
You said
Yes.
retiring? Or
Yep.
Retired?
Yeah, now retiring. Well, I don't know her personally, but she's been an awesome Chief Justice. And I did hear her at a recent memorial service for a former SJC Justice Kaplan, who was really awesome. She said when she graduated from Yale that she interviewed with Justice Kaplan, and she didn't get the job. And later, somebody told her that Kaplan said that he had once had a law clerk from Yale, and he was a disaster, and he'd never have another. And Chief Justice Marshall said, and he didn't. And there she was, for the Chief Justice many years later.
That's great.
So nobody should get discouraged. I don't know how she did it, but she went to the top.
I brought all kinds of props in, but I was ready for anything.
You're definitely going to be invited back,
And
there's no doubt.
that's one of those things, as a lawyer, you have to be ready for anything. My first year class, legal practice skills, the best thing I learned in law school was that a lawyer has to have the ability to speak on their feet and to recover from adversity. And I think that fits with the whole shipyard motif, but it really, as a lawyer, you have to be able to talk, you have to be able to write. As an intern, you have to be able to do both those things. So if you're not comfortable speaking, you need to learn to get comfortable and, do speaking things at school. Whenever you have the opportunity to speak, it's an opportunity for leadership. whenever you have the opportunity to write. And not everyone gets on law review. I wasn't on law review, and I've had a meaningful life and children and family. So, you know, great if you're on law review. I'm not knocking law review, but
I'm making that very personal right now.
it doesn't, you know, it's not everything. If you didn't get the internship that you wanted, there's somewhere else to go. I saw this, my final prop, I saw this in the Herald the other day, and I really didn't even look at the article. I just saw this picture of a woman with a Vogue t-shirt with 5 beautiful, large dogs. And I was thinking, gee, how does she manage all those dogs? And then the article says, Catherine Hansen, 30, of Brighton, a Charlie Baker voter, graduated from Suffolk Law and Business Schools in May and was sworn in Monday as a lawyer in Connecticut, but she's still without a steady job. Trust me, I have 3 degrees and I'm dog walking. I know how bad the economy is. But she doesn't look down and out. She made it on the Herald, and I'm sure that she's probably got multiple job offers. So, my friend Donald Trump says, what separates the winners from the losers is how a person reacts to each new twist of fate. And that's really what it's all about. You've made it to law school. It's a lot of people that didn't get as far as you have already, so you need to be proud of that. You're all working hard. You're moving to your next step in the process, which is to graduate, and then to pass the bar, and then to find a job, and then to figure out how it all is going to fit into your life. So it's a step-by-step process. If you do what you're supposed to, more likely than not, and I think it's even more probable than not, things will work out for you. But you can't fall apart when things don't go your way. If, you know, you get the mean judge who, you know, sends you back to the library and says, you know, you got to do this all over again, or I don't have time for this right now. You got to smile and say, yes, Your Honor, or yes, Judge. That's always pretty much the right answer to anything. The judge say, yes, Judge, and you'll be fine. You have to understand your place as an intern or a law clerk. You're not the one who signed it. It's the judge's signature, so they always get the last word. And if you can understand that and accept it and embrace it, you'll be way ahead of everybody else. It's a great opportunity and an honor to be an intern or a law clerk and to be a law student. I mean, in a few short years, you're going to be a lawyer and you're going to have the ability to impact people's lives and to help them, hopefully to make some money for yourself. But it's not about what you can get out of it. It's about what you can contribute and how you can further the profession, just as my colleagues have said about how the work you do reflects on interns behind you. It's the same as when you're a lawyer. It really doesn't change a whole lot. I don't think lawyers get harassed as much as law students do, so that's one nice break about graduating. People actually treat you with respect instead of, person over here, what's the answer to that? Gentleman behind her, what's the answer? Oh, you're totally out of it, you know. You get treated a little bit better, so that's something to look forward to. It was a great honor for us to be here to talk with you. I know I'd be happy to answer any questions afterwards.
All right, I think other people on the panel are nodding their heads. So on that note, I couldn't have said it better myself, Michael. You're hired. You can come back.